Namaskar. A happy 75th Independence Day to you all. I have with me a stellar cast of guests who will be looking at Sri M R Venkatesh's latest book, Retaining Balance. We have with us Advaita Kalaji, Gaurie Dwivedi, Jayaraman Krishnan, and Kalpana Shukla, both of whom will be joining us shortly. Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us.
Good
And
evening, sirs.
A few words about the author, Sri M R Venkatesh. Apart from being a very good friend of mine, he is one of India's leading advocates on economic criminal laws and a much sought after legal professional. He's also a keen student of economics and politics. As a professional, he has been an advisor to several corporates and promoters on complex transactions involving cross disciplinary expertise. His earlier book, titled Sensex and Sentiments, has been acknowledged by experts as one of the pioneering works in the field of anti money laundering. He's also a ranker in the final examination of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and well recognized for his professional integrity and acumen. MRV, as he is fondly called by his friends, is a rare breed of an advocate who brings a trans professional approach to the table. He has recently completed his doctoral thesis on the issue of agricultural subsidies with Sastra University. So it is appropriate for us to address him as Dr. MRV. He has authored Global Imbalances and the Impending Dollar Crisis, Sensex and Sentiments, Failure of India's Financial Sentinels, and Dr. Manmohan Singh, A Decade of Decay. He is a regular panelist in leading channels in India and also a columnist in various print media. He's hugely popular on Twitter for his communal versus secular alliterations. His new book, Retaining Balance, is a fascinating approach to dealing with challenges faced by a discipline of economics. This work critically analyzes the prevalent conundrum of policy framers who place too much reliance on the individual, in the process ignoring the traditional institutions of family, society, and community. Rampant individualism, in turn, results in excesses leading to the proliferation of either a corrosive state or an extortionist market. Retaining balance traces this conundrum to the Christian theology of original sin and broken self, necessitating salvation through an external agent, namely the state or markets in the first place. This arrangement has spawned a series of excesses resulting in extant macroeconomic imbalances. We can ask him that question, what is an extant macroeconomic imbalances, in a short while. But before we proceed further, let me introduce our guests one by one. Advaita Galaji, please come online. Namaskar. And you have been a film writer, an author. You have your own very successful program, which I'm sure you need to be getting to very soon because I know it airs on Sunday evenings. So why don't you go in first, madam, and then we will we'll bring in our guests one at a time.
Well, thank you so much for hosting this on PGurus, which is so widely watched. So it's a wonderful opportunity. And especially on this very auspicious day, I would say, which is India's 75th Independence Day. And I want to congratulate Dr. M R Venkatesh on his new book. And I couldn't think of a better day to launch it on, which is a day of recalibration, of understanding how far we've come, how far we need to go, and really of serious contemplation as we build the India of tomorrow. So I really appreciate the intervention that this very timely book is going to make in our discourse, especially when it comes to public policy framing, as you so rightly mentioned. And of course, the fact that, the lens through which we have to take a look at economic decisions. Are they in sync with our own value system, that of putting the collective over the individual, which is a Bharatiya lens, a Bharatiya view life and light. And unfortunately, you're absolutely right. In the chase for capitalistic prosperity, which is not necessarily a bad thing, I might add, on some level, we have left behind the value based life and social structures that really nourished and took hold of our civilization and made it last for the thousands of years that it has. So I think this perspective on looking at policy through the lens of family is a wonderful intervention, and I truly recommend that everybody reads this. I'm of course not an economist, like I told Dr. Venkatesh many times when he invited me to the launch of this. So I'm afraid I can't make the interventions on based on economic policy, but certainly from a sociological perspective, from the perspective of family, I feel this is very unique. This study of the economy and of intervention. So I welcome this book, and I really encourage your viewers to read it and really look at India in its or Bharat in its true sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Advaita Kalaji. And now let us listen from Gaurie Dwivedi. Viewers, you all know her from watching ET News or NewsX. Now, Gaurie has also written a new book, which we had her on our channel a few weeks ago talking about it. Gaurie ji, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel, and your thoughts on MRV's new book.
Thank you so much for having me today in this very wonderful discussion. Advaita ji is correct that there couldn't have been a more opportune day than today to discuss what I believe could be a very path-breaking conversation around the intersection of policy making and the socio-economic lens through which economic policies are formed. And I think today is a day when we celebrate our freedom, and we also need to now embrace freedom from the very mindsets that plague our economic decision making. I read some of the stuff that Dr. Venkatesh had shared with me, and some of the content looks very promising in terms of starting a dialogue, starting a conversation around how do we actually go about our economic policy making exercise, the prism through which we look at it, whether it should be individual, whether it should be society, and on several welfare schemes. I think their efficacy can be revisited if we change the lens through which we view our beneficiaries as far as any of the welfare schemes that India runs. You know, between the state and the center, I mean, I would hazard a guess going into probably 100 as far as the welfare schemes are concerned, if not more. And the efficacy of all those can be revisited, can be seen if we change the lens through which we view the beneficiaries. And not just economic policies alone, even social policies. You know, I mean, this is a conversation which could probably make me, some people could cast some serious aspersions on my overall socio-economic thinking, but I am going to still hazard my opinion and say it out here that even as far as the whole policy of reservation is concerned, you know, for 70 years, we've been going around the same path as far as reservations are concerned for upliftment of our brothers and sisters belonging to who have been less privileged for centuries. But the efficacy of those schemes can also be revisited if we change the lens, the prism through which we view the beneficiaries. Should it be family? Should it be only the individual? How should we view that? All of that can be revisited the moment we have a completely different context. And I laud Dr. Venkatesh for having starting this conversation, because that is what we really need, is a starting point, and this book could really provide that starting point. I wish him all the very best, and I really look forward to some of his opinions and thoughts during this entire conversation.
Thank you very much. And Dr. MRV, we are having a little bit of a technical difficulty getting Sri Jayaraman Krishnan on board. Why don't you introduce us to him, sir? And then let's see if he can get his voice working. He is visible now on the screen. Please go ahead.
Mr. Krishnan, are you able to hear us? Mr. Krishnan? Okay, I think he's not able to hear us, and I think there is some technological challenge in dealing with him. As far as Krishnan goes, I think Mr. Krishnan walked into my cabin some 15-20 years back as a member of the Madras Chamber. The Madras Chamber is probably one of the oldest chambers in the country, along with the Bombay and the Calcutta Chamber. And Krishnan was heading the logistic part of the Madras Chamber. and probably under his guidance, several of the new issues were taken up, and probably we were benefited by sagacious advice on several things relating to infrastructure and especially on ports, on which he's a master. Incidentally, he owns a business which probably he heads for the. I think the business is now in the fourth generation business in Madras, and he's heading it. And today, I can tell you with some amount of pride, Krishnan is my lucky charm also. And always I have Krishnan by my side for one simple reason, that whenever whatever he touches, as far as I'm concerned, it turns into gold. As far as whether it turns gold for him or not, I don't know. But for me, it turns into gold. So that's the biggest part of it. In fact, there's a selfishness embedded in inviting Krishnan into this program. Okay, so I think if Krishnan, can you come through some other device so that we can hear you? Unfortunately, we're not able to hear you.
Okay, MRV, while we try to figure this out, Krishnanji is able to hear us. Krishnanji, you can try and use your smartphone to connect to this same conversation. If you have email on your smartphone, you can go and click on that link and you will be able to do that. But while he joins us, we're also waiting for Kalpana ji to join, and that has still not happened. But let us keep going forward. Advaita ji, what are your impressions about the book? Do you have any specific questions? Because I have a few questions that I'd like to ask, but you all had a chance to read the book. Any thoughts on how you saw this book? He has spent a lot of time. I remember looking at the manuscript about 9 months ago, I think, and talking about it. MRV, was it 9 months ago we were talking about it?
Almost. Yeah. It took me the whole of last year.
Yeah. So a lot of work has gone into this book. And Advaita ji, if you would like to have any observations / questions.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I definitely would have a question for Dr. Venkatesh. I want to ask you really is, this intersection or this, I don't want to use the word conflict, maybe it's too strong, but certainly the Abrahamic perspective of looking at the economy and even the constitution versus the Bharatiya perspective. I mean, that has been a bit of a trigger point for you in the writing of this book, because at some point in our conversations, you've mentioned to me that you felt that there had been a drift towards an Abrahamic viewpoint of these major and critical decisions when it comes to policy making and running our country, which are to a large extent not in consonance with our cultural or civilizational experience. So I'd like you to elaborate that a little more for our viewers.
In fact, the question goes to the soul of the book, and you touched a raw nerve straight away. In fact, I see the Constitution of India, which probably all of us pride and have a great amount of respect. I see that as a Christian construct. Let us not beat around the bush. I see that as something that was taken in from the 1935 Government of India. Okay, and it was not as original a work that it is made out to be. Krishnan, I think you are using two machines. That is why there is an echo. I think now we can hear you, but on two machines.
No, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
yes,
I can.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
We can hear you. Now, let me complete this question. Now, as far as I'm concerned, my work was primarily to see how did we end up with a so-called welfare state. Now, Gauriji was alluding to the efficacy of the welfare state. I was going into the concept of state as we see today, the omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient state that we have carved out. And how did we come to this stage? And it took me to the Hobbesian thought. And I did some research on this particular idea, that by and large, the entire Western philosophy, Western scientific research, whether it is even somebody as agnostic as Marx is, somebody like Dawkins, who has written about the selfish gene, all of them, according to one author called Charles Boyce, owe their thinking or thought process to the Christian theology, and more particularly to the original sin. So they begin with original sin, and they believe that each of us are a byproduct of that original sin, and each one of us are born bad. So Hobbes comes out with this theory that man is brutish, selfish, and hence he requires an external agent called Christ insofar as salvation is concerned. I have no problem with that. As far as Christians are concerned, I have no problem. You believe that you can't do a salvation by yourself. You do the salvation part of it through an external agent called Christ. No issues on that. But the same theory has been embedded in every single sociological or humanities that is concerning us, and of which it has also been decided by the Westerners or Western philosophers, well intended, but the question is whether it suits us. The intended part of it was that man is brutish, man is selfish, so you require an external agent called the state, the omnipotent, omnipresent state. Now, having created this omnipotent, omnipresent state, we realized that we have taken the man completely as we purged him of all his rights, and then we decided that look, we have purged him of all his rights, so we have to give him certain fundamental rights which need to be given to him, and hence we made a huge issue about these fundamental rights, especially whenever June 26 comes in and emergency is reminded. We talk about our fundamental rights in part 3 of the Constitution. So all this, if you link together, you find that it owes its origin to the Christian theology of Adam and Eve and the original sin and the broken self. Now, we are exactly the contrasting civilization. We believe in salvation through the self. We believe in moksha. We believe in duties. We don't believe in rights. And we believe in a system that is neither individualistic nor is it collectivized. So we tend towards individualism when it is required. We tend towards collectivism when it is required. It is not an absolutism. And more importantly, I was startled that we never believe in something called absolutism in any sense of the term. Everything is contextual, everything goes back and forth, everything is flexible, everything has got joints that are well lubricated. So we are trying to take a system of constitution and an economics that has been devised for that particular system, transplant it into a system or a civilization that has no civilizational moorings towards rights and no civilization moorings towards, say, the broken self. So we are a totally different breed, totally different makeup civilizationally. So the economics per se, whether it is markets, whether it is liberalism, or whether it is socialism, becomes slightly unworkable at some point in time. This was my original theory, of which I have argued several subsets, and that's for the reader to decide.
Thank you very much, Mr. Venkatesh, or Dr. Venkatesh, I should say. Sri Krishnan ji is just joining us. Can you hear us, sir?
Yes, I can hear you.
Wonderful. Welcome to our channel. It's a pleasure and honor to have you, sir. If you could just say a few words about your association with Dr. MRV, that'll be great.
Well, the MRV did talk about my Madras Chamber days, but what we really relish about the association with the MRV is he is a good friend, a mentor, and person whom we all have immense respect for his no-nonsense attitude and rather cheeky on many issues, but one person who is well-meaning, and at his heart, it is the development of this nation that drives him. The passion that we see in him is nothing but we are to get back to our days of glory, a glorious Bharat. I don't think I need to add any more to praise MRV.
Thank you very much, sir. And viewers, let's get back to Gaurie ji. We have momentarily lost Advaita ji. Hopefully, she'll be joining us back again. Gaurie ji, what are your impressions on going through the book? If one of the things I noticed, and I don't know if you have noticed also, if you look at the title or the subtext, he says, um, uh, the eternal way. He mentions the eternal way, and I read it as the Sanatani way, because Sanatana Dharma is eternal flow. So this is how I see it. Your thoughts, perhaps you may have other observations too. Please take it away.
Yes, absolutely. The eternal way and how you really find that balance in policy making is really the biggest question that this book really throws light on. And I must compliment Dr. Venkatesh for it's a voluminous work. 2 lakh words is a huge achievement. And it takes a lot of research to be able to come out with something so voluminous. So my congratulations and best wishes on that front. But specifically, sir, I would like to ask that when you talk about something so foundational in its approach, how do you see it impacting our future policy making? Because uh, unfortunately, we can't go back in time. We cannot change for better or for worse. We are with what we have. How do we now have a forward looking approach to address some of these very important and pressing issues? You mentioned about welfare state, and I earlier in my opening comments mentioned about affirmative action, because I feel those are really the foundation pillars as far as how we view or how our constitution really envisages this country to be run.
Gauriji, the answer is very simple. We have to start going back to rewriting our constitution. You can't simply say this constitution is the best that we have got and nothing needs to be done except tinkering here and there. And now every 3 months or 4 months you assemble in 20 days, 15 days and pass some laws. This is not going to take us forward, and we are meandering into nothing. And let us put it in a very simplistic terms. Now, all of us know biologically there are 100 female babies for 105 male babies. This is statistics for us. So a man for a woman is what genetically or naturally is endowed to us. Now, I have argued in my first chapter, this is where I begin, how you go back to the nature, that a man for a woman, or as we say in Tamil Kalacharam, the Tamil culture, which we all pride so much, talks about Urmanuku Uruthi. A man for a woman is what is Tamil Kalacharam. You have copious volumes of Tamil literature talking about one man for a boy for a girl, and so on and so forth. Now you disturb this, and a man takes 4 wives. Okay, 3 men are left without the benign touch of a woman. Now what happens to them? They turn into Talibans. Now it is so fundamental that you can say we have come so far, we can't do much about it. But the solution lies is turning back and going back and addressing the root of the problem. The root of the problem is not people who turn into terrorists because of theological, economic, or any other reason, but it is as functional, as fundamental as biological. And it is this 20 to 30-year-old people, men, without the benign touch of a woman, that they turn into what is called as terrorists, or you may call it lumpen elements, you may call it criminals. And this is the root of criminology, where everybody in that age group who is unmarried becomes criminal. Now, in a traditional setup, the moment a boy of the age of say 20, 22, 25 starts showing or displaying deviant behavior, the elders in the family will say, "Iski shadi karwa do." Now, it may look very mundane, very, very, shall I say, primordial also, but that is how solutions are brought about. You go back and say, after all, the question that I have asked repeatedly is, what is economics? Is it about meeting demand and supply in a materialistic world? Or is it to take the copious wisdom of our civilizational flow of the last 5,000, 8,000, 10,000 years, and then draw appropriate reductions and deductions and carry forward? I'm not saying all that you turn backwards. I'm asking for, yes, you strengthen family. Now let me give you this is the problem. This is the core of the conundrum. You say now Supreme Court is going to look into whether polygamy affects the rights of women or not. Fair enough. It is going to look into it. But at the same time, it has decriminalized adultery. Now, what is the difference between polygamy and adultery? Polygamy with a theological sanction is adultery, or adultery with a theological sanction is polygamy. Now, is the Supreme Court going to come and say, no, polygamy is banned or polygamy is acceptable? These are fundamental things that we need to address if we are going to strengthen family. And if you are going to strengthen family, you are going to strengthen society. Unless we strengthen family and society, there is no peace. Unless there is no peace, there is no economic progress. Now, if we settle these type of fundamental things and go about block by block on our economic modeling, then only we achieve certain progress. Otherwise, it is going to be that M3 will be taught by monetary economists. Fiscal deficits will be taken care of by your fiscal economists or macroeconomists. And then we will be trying to reconcile the two and say that things are not happening. And this is what I call as we are oscillating between Hayek and Keynes without having a clear third way or the alternative way to suggest the model forward. So I am linking both sociology and also economics. I see economics as a discipline which is not dry in the dust, completely delinked from sociological impact. I see it in the elephant in the room. The sociology or the family, culture, civilizational ethos, everything will be interlinked and intertwined to the issue of economics. Unfortunately, you are dealing it, and we have got only one side of the coin. We are not dealing the other side of the coin.
Dr. MRV, you've hit the nail on the head in terms of defining why this book was written. You've made some very interesting observations, especially about one man and one woman. And Advaita ji, thanks for coming back. And I know you have to leave in a bit of time, so I would let you ask the next question if you have one, ma'am, because my context from this last answer of Dr. MRV is that, so you are seeing this polygamy of 4 wives to 1 man play out now in a very, very crude fashion in Taliban and in Afghanistan. So I see that whatever you have predicted is already playing it out now, whether it is Taliban today or the case of ISIS and Yazidis a few years ago. Advaita ji, would you have any observations on how he has really defined the problem here, and where does uniform civil code come into all this? This is just my question. I'm just probably putting words in your mouth, like you to ask the next question. This was just something that just came to my mind. Please go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I actually have a question for Dr. Venkatesh, which is really about, say, the evolving family as well. Society also evolves. You see, homosexuality has been decriminalized. There are increasing number of gay people who want to have their own families. On top of that, you have single people, single women like myself, who are leading, different lives, which are individual because, they are not, because we're not married or, part of or procreators or had children. So how then are individuals like myself and other people who do not fall into the traditional structure or definition of family in society, how do we benefit? How do we get engaged in this new definition that you're creating?
I'm not creating any new definition. I'm only carrying forward the old definition. As I said, nothing is absolute in the traditional context. As I said, there will be people who would not fall within the broader definition of what is a family. But definitely you see gays, homosexuals, or what we may even go to the extent of defining them as extraordinary people or deviant behavior people. Whatever you may term them, first and foremost, we must respect the fact that whatever is natural is divine. And if people are exercising their particular individual choice, we must respect it. But as a state, we must ensure that welfare is not targeted to break families, like what has happened in the West in the New Deal. And that is the argument I'm putting forth. In fact, the traditional Indian way has always been to respect individual preferences or behavior. We don't even question that. In fact, I'm glad you asked this question, and I'm very forthright in this. In fact, the leftists, the liberals, in fact, I quoted leftists how Cuba dealt with sexually deviant behavior people. And now these are the people who are championing the cause of gays and homosexuals. I am nobody. In fact, this space is what the traditional Indians have respected and always said, that you want to lead your life, please do it. And there is nothing wrong in that. But there are a huge amount of people, please understand, a majority of the people who still go by the family definition of whatever it is, what is called as the traditional family. What I say is that let the state not interfere in that. Let the state not break the family. Let the state not bring in policies that break down families further. That's the larger point I'm trying to put it across. And we have seen, as in the case of America, that the debt of America has gone up extraordinarily high, and they have spent something like $22 trillion in the last 40 years. $22 trillion in the last 40 years, they have not been able to save families. And that cost comes in onto the state. The state, instead of doing what it is supposed to do, becomes a nanny state. And to fund this nanny state, you have a huge taxation regime. And this taxation regime is actually punishing those who are disciplined. And you are actually paying off those who are indisciplined. Now, that question is not about individual behavior. The question is about saving family, and which is the most efficacious economic unit as I see it.
Interesting, because I think that is the sort of inclusivity, that changing dynamics in terms of even the family structure. For example, you brought up the American context. In the US now, you have a situation where a majority of the families are single mother families. And especially in India as well, in our urban areas, you are seeing an increase in divorces. You are seeing a fracturing of the family structure in very profound ways. So the single parent family is something that has become a reality, much more so than it ever has been in our history. And
Yes.
Especially single mother-led families do have like economic constraints and things of that nature, which make it very problematic. I'll tell you, even if you have to get a loan, it becomes very difficult, if you're a single woman, to get a loan. So
And Advaita ji, the problem is that has an economic cost, and that's the point I'm making. That breakdown of structure has got a huge implication at the macro level, and that's one dimension of the book. And how you build it, how you reconcile it, and it is not that we need to break families and celebrate this breakdown of families. Yes, it can be an individual choice. I have no issues about that. But breakdown of families, state-sponsored. That's what is the American New Deal was all about, especially by Moynihan and others. They actually decimated the families in say 20, 30 years. And this is, I thought, was something that we need to be very cautious as we go ahead in the next, say, 10, 15 years as we make our policies.
Dr. MRV, I would like to still ask you that question. Gauriji, if you can ready up your next question. In the meantime, let me ask my question now. So what I was trying to say was that, do you think the Uniform Civil Code, that is, it's a long time coming, if that is passed, at least will some steps be taken? Will some people be forced to think like having multiple wives is actually depriving somebody else of something? This 105 to 100, that is so stark. I mean, I think you are being very generous. I think it is more like 105 to 80, but I could be wrong.
By
go
nature.
Ahead. Yeah.
No, by
nature. Okay.
Nature has devised an algorithm, whereas there are 100 baby girls for 105 boys. And what happens to those 5 boys? They become Swami Vivekananda and Narendra Modi. So that's entirely a different thing. So that 5 is reserved for them. So that's left it at that. But as far as your question about uniform civil code, see, the problem for me is anything which is structured as to be homogeneous is a dangerous one. It's again comes from the West. Uniformity is never an Indian thought. Equity is an Indian thought. Uniformity is never an Indian thought. Having said that, yes, there are certain issues that we need to look into it in the concept that the end game should be equity and equality. And one of the biggest inequalities suffered by women is to be subjected to a polygamous marriage. I think that sharing an husband is the worst form of iniquity that you can heap on women. I think the state would do far, a great deal of progress by addressing this issue of polygamy. Need not be through an uniform civil code, need not be through a common civil code. This is something that we need to look into it as something aberrant and something that is not in line with the constitutional ethos. As simple as that. We have to say that, look, a man for a woman is what nature has devised us, and it doesn't take a seer to say that, look, we have to construct something, we have to have enormous amount of sitting in the Supreme Court. All these are so fundamental that we should not allow polygamy. Now, whether it is polygamy need not be any, again, let us not nitpick on a particular religion or a particular faith. I am absolutely pro-woman on this, that polygamous marriage is the worst form of humiliation that you will inflict on a lady. So, to that extent, even without the civil code, uniform civil code, we can go ahead with this particular legislation and cure ourselves of the great defect in our constitution.
Gauriji, I yield the floor to you.
Dr. Venkatesh, some of these ideas one may call very path-breaking, but your honors will call this too revolutionary to even be entertained. Two of the panelists understand law very well, you as well as Mr. Krishnan. I want to understand how much of this do you think we can implement, and the roadmap towards implementation, because the idea and the ideas that you've thrown up and in the spirit of their implementation, it's the roadmap that is most critical.
Yeah. Gauriji, the most fundamental thing that I have suggested is part 3 of the Constitution should include, instead of only fundamental rights, it should also include fundamental duties. Now, you may say that this is path-breaking, revolutionary, this is something unheard of, etc. I traced a document, what is called as the Bogota Conference. And even though Mexico's constitution has got certain fundamental rights vested on individuals, right? Now, these are not something that is totally unheard of. Now, Bogota Conference was in the year 1948 or 47. And this preceded the Conference on United Nations on Human Rights. But once it shifted from Central America to North America, and from Bogota to Washington, immediately it became a question of individual rights. And the UN Human Rights Commission Chairman, asked Mahatma Gandhi to write a preface or probably a letter on what he thinks about rights. Gandhiji was very clear. He said that, look, a right without duty, corresponding duty, cannot sell by itself. Now, this was Mahatma Gandhi. This was in Hind Swaraj. This is in Bogota Conference. This is in Mexico's constitution. So these are all things people have flirted, people have agreed. But unfortunately, what happened? These all came about in the year 1940s, 47, 48, 49. By the time the World War happened and America triumphed the other countries. And once America triumphed this, you will be surprised that American thought, American constitutional values became universal values. But you must also understand, I have again quoted in the book from William Tucker, that how an Swedish actress, and this may be interesting to Sri Iyer, I don't know how do you spell it, Ingis Bergman. Or
Ingrid Bergman.
Bergman.
Yes.
Casablanca.
That lady had an affair with an Italian, and whenever you have an affair with an Italian, you are in problems. So this lady had a affair with Roberto Rossellini or somebody, a director, and outside of marriage, she became pregnant, and in 50s she sought a visa to enter into America. Americans refused. They said, we cannot allow a celebrity who is pregnant and has a child outside of marriage to enter this particular country, because you will start creating an example for our girl children. Now, 2008, I wrote an article in the Rediff. At that time, I used to write very heavily in the Rediff. I traced it to the question of how in a Massachusetts school, girls who were in probably 10th standard equivalent, their high school or grade 10 equivalent, were having a pact amongst themselves as to who would get pregnant first, and went to the nearby primary health center to declare that they had been labeled as being pregnant, or the test reports done. Now the father cannot question the child, the mother cannot question the child, the society cannot question the child, and the state says if you have a child which is outside of wedlock, you don't know the father of the child, no problem. The state will pay you, will take care of you, will fund your child, and there are creches attached to schools where the child goes and feeds her own child during recess. Now, is this a model for the world to follow? Now, it may sound that we have come too far. Again, I agree, coming back to your question, have we come too far that we can't reverse the process? If we don't reverse the process, the consequences, I'm not here to say reverse it or not. I am here as a scholar to tell that the consequences of your decision could be as bad as this. 60 years is what has taken America to come to this stage. 60s in New York, a single mother would not get a house for rent. This could be probably even today in India, in most parts of the cities, you will get it. But 60s, America was like this. Now, this has completely impacted their economics. I don't have to tell you, you yourself are a great economist. You would know the balance sheet of America. It is wallowing in $22 trillion of debt. And much of it is what we, the poor developing nations, have paid America. China has lent its reserves to America. India has lent its reserves to America. South Korea has lent its reserves to America. Indonesia, Japan, Germany. You take all these countries, they are actually funding not the American consumption, but they are funding America's lack of culture and restraint. That is a very, very important macro level economic imbalance that we need to address.
Any follow-ups on that, Gauriji?
No, this is very interesting about the whole conversation around rights versus duties, and yes, you're right that there is now an impression that has been created, and it has this expectation that individual rights, they tantamount to actually having your bulldozing your view through everything else. I think that needs to stop, because only then some corrections can begin. But where do
Yeah.
you really start is the something that will be most interesting to see, because rights versus duties is a conversation that is ripe right now for India to have.
Thanks, Gauriji. The mechanics, yes, we will all have to probably a sequel to the book dealing exclusively on the mechanics. Yes, I will try to work it out. But I thought this is very important to link both economics and the cultural part, and to also lay out very clearly what is the consequences arising out of this particular annihilation of culture. That's a very important thing. I thought individual restraint. I don't use the word culture. I say individual restraints is very important in taking forward economic thoughts.
Any data that you can share with us, Dr. Venkatesh, about the impact that this has had on the American economy in the last 30, 40 years? Because that could really tell us the staggering, nature of the problem that we are talking about.
Yeah, chapter 2 and chapter 3 have dealt very extensively on this particular thing. And see this destruction of family and having a set of wives for a particular alpha male is probably as old as Platonic thoughts. I traced it even to Plato's writings. I see family as the most fundamental institution on which the entire civilizational aspects of humankind has grown, or it has based. We have based ourselves on the fundamental institution. The first known institution that we have built up is family. Now, as far as data is concerned, I have drawn copious amount of data on chapter 2 and chapter 3, and especially if you see both individual debt and government debt has started increasing from the point of say 1965 when the New Deal was started to be ushered into the American economy. America, in fact, there are authors who lament that America has given up its Calvinist spirit. And Calvinist spirit is nothing but Protestant spirit, and Protestant spirit has been by and large to be self-restrained. In fact, Tocqueville, who comes to America in the year 1820s and 1830s, says that, look, how great is America. Here is a man who goes and works. Here is a woman who takes care of so many things. Here is a man who takes care of his responsibilities. And the family is so united. And he lavishes praise and says, look, why is America great and why is Europe falling behind and why is America rising? And he says, and I could see that happens till 1950s and 60s. And 1950s, 60s, that 120 years, the rise of America has been phenomenal. But the moment three things happen, you have the contraceptive pills, you have this rights movement, you have the feminist movement, all coming and attacking America all in one go. And what happens is, instead of addressing the problems of the blacks, instead of addressing the problem of single-wed mothers, the state declared it as a policy. And once the state started, I have nothing against individuals doing things. Let it. They are doing it by their own choice, by their own volition. But for a state to become a nanny state and start funding all single-wed mothers, and that has incentivized even 10th standard students to become pregnant. Whether you find it abhorrent or whether you find it acceptable, that's the question before us.
Yes, indeed, yes. And will that just one very short question? I know Shreya wants to come in. I want to ask that how does the book impact several states which are actually now under grip is a very strong word, but under far more influence of Christianity than others in India. There are some states which are really going through waves of conversion far more than others. Do you think that those states are going to see far more rapid changes than some of the others?
Yes, the rights movement by itself is a Christian construct, and we need to and I don't see, unless you are going to place responsibility and duties of the individual as central to your argument, you can't fight Christendom just because you want to fight it, and you should not. And my view is that unless you have a theoretical alternative, practically implementable alternative, you should not jump into anything. And one step at a time, and probably this book would probably make everybody understand that we have swung too far towards making this, you may say this is a secular state, but we have a Christian constructed constitution. So we need to understand that the state may be outwardly secular, it may be, it may not be, that's a different political point of view. But constitutionally speaking, we are a Christian state. We need to move away from it and find out, and I would say like the movie Onion, there is a movie where the hero plays with bipolar disorder. At one time he's meek and other time he's strong. And whenever we, in a conversation with you or with Ashri Iyer, all of us are Bharatiyas, in the sense we are rooted to our values, our system, our tolerance, our ethos. But the moment we deal with the state, we are all Indians and we want to talk about our rights. So I see there is a huge dichotomy also. And for this must be the only country, I've done some research but I couldn't get it. the first article of the Constitution begins by saying India, that is Bharat. We can't be saying Ramchandra alias Raju. We are not dealing with any individual with a pet name or surname or whatever. We are dealing with the country, and the country itself has two names. So it has two characters. It has two. The peoples are Bharatiyas in one sense, Indians in one sense, and there is a bipolar disorder afflicting. So to answer your question, that states are also afflicted by that. They may be secular, as far as the constitution is concerned, as practicality is concerned, but as a constitutional construct, they are, somewhat of moving towards the Christian theology.
Thank you very much, Gauriji. You've taken a lot of weight off of my shoulders. You've asked a lot of pertinent questions, and as has Aditya Kalaji. Viewers, we regret to inform you that Kalpanaji couldn't join on this panel. And as we wind this thing down, I have just a couple of takeaways. One, Dr. MRV, today the reality is that there are going to be single families, there are going to be people who are going to be part of the LGBTQ, and there are going to be people who are going to have normal families. So is your book going to suggest a way out for all these different, Rainbow Coalition? I mean, we will not be able to directly start going back to being a family, even assuming that everybody has the mindset to do that. How does one move forward and still strike the balance?
See, you have to respect individual choices. No other way. You can't say this is the benchmark, that I can't lay out a benchmark for you to follow. I may be gay, you may not be, or you may be gay, I may not be. Let us respect our individual choices, but that's not the core of the issue. The core of the issue is, if there is an individual choice, there must also be a cost that is paid by the individual. That is the point I'm making. It cannot be, I am a gay and you have to pay me taxes. If I am a gay and the consequences of being a gay has to be faced by me. If I am having 8 children and I want to have 8 children, the state cannot look at me as poor, downtrodden, whatever, and ask itself that, contrive itself to tax you, and then take your taxes and pay me and say this is welfare. What is welfare is not defined. We have degenerated from being a welfare state into a reckless state. And taxes are not a price that we pay for civilization. We are actually paying a price for destroying the civilization.
I'd like to see if Mr. Krishnan wants to come in with some of his thoughts. Go ahead, sir.
MRV, sir, it is truly fascinating. I just wanted to throw 2 words at you. One is Swadharma, one is Vasudeva Kudumbakam. How much has these words inspired you in your writing? Because when you talk of individual rights, we already have a concept of Swadharma. And similarly, the word as a family is also Indian thought. It is not found anywhere else. How much has these 2 words influenced your writings?
Sir, I would see if we can restrict ourselves to one fundamental. You have to understand, as a writer, I have to deal with the contemporary world, and I have to deal with the economist in me. I have to deal with the lawyer in me. I have to deal with the commentator in me in public media or electronic media. So I have to reconcile, and I have consciously decided not to go too much into Hindu philosophies and Hindu thoughts, because even in Hindu philosophy, there will be enormous amount of writing about, right from, you have a huge overarching ideas that flow in, right from saying that somebody can be an agnostic to somebody who can say that I'm a Advaitist or an Advaitist, so on and so forth. Hinduism gives you that amount of latitude to play around. So I have not gone too much into Hindu ideas, but I have said, fundamentally, I have said that here is something that my final chapter has been, it took me almost 3 months to think about the title for that chapter. The chapter's title is, Ram Rajya is where it is Rajya without Rama. Now, why do I say that? When we have a Rajya, when people adhere to their own Swadharma, as you alluded to, and they continue to do their own work, the role of the state instantly becomes a residuary state. The problem is if you anticipate or if you foresee that the citizenry of this country will be indisciplined, citizenry of this country will be criminals, citizenry of this country will be irresponsible, then you start devising a state that will be an omnipotent, omnipresent state. That is what is the Hobbesian traditional view. You have not started with Swadharma, you have started with the fact that every individual is born back. Now you go back and try to look at it that you will have criminals in every society, you will have lawbreakers in every society, you will have people who will do something, who will have deviant behavior everywhere. But can the state alone deal with this problem? That is the question. Has the state been successful in dealing with the problem? And nowhere, Mr. Krishnan, let me tell you, has welfare led to prosperity of a country in the aggregate. I'm sure Gauriji can add to this if she has any example. But as a welfare, I can probably be giving a good metaphor. God forbid, if I'm injured, you may give me a bottle of blood. But there is no occasion where my 6 liters of blood can be supplied by another individual day in and day out. We have to necessarily look at people being enabled to be prosperous. And that is the way forward. Not to say that we will ensure that people are poor and we have to fund the people who are poor below the poverty line. And so we need a welfare state. I think this is the bottom line that I thought I would bring it about.
Well said, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Krishnan and Gauriji. And I have a quick question for you, MRV. As we wind down this program, can you please tell our viewers where we can get your book? When do you think it's going to hit the Amazon site or wherever you're planning to sell this book out of? That detail so that we all know where to get our books.
Actually, unfortunately, the Ms. Kalpana, who is the publisher of the book, KW Publishers, she was supposed to join. She's not joined today due to some technical issues. Yeah, the book is under print now, and probably in another 15-20 days, it should be arriving at all bookstores, major bookstores, and probably by September 1st, it will have a Kindle version also, the soft version, and we can have it. So it could be as early as 10 to 15 days. But can I take a minute, Mr. Iyer?
Please go ahead.
I want to thank two people who have sold these ideas of this book. One was Mr. Gurumurthy, with whom I had extensive dialogue several times over. And probably he has spawned, I attended a series of his lectures and he has probably triggered this. And I would also say that Dr. Subramanian Swami has been very kind enough to have elaborate amount of discussions with me. In fact, once I was discussing with him about this, he had thrown about an idea called harmonious society, what the Chinese actually aim at. And those are the debates, dialogues, discussions that has probably helped me in fashioning this book. So I think I should thank them. This being the occasion, I thought I should thank them. And of course, I should thank a series of people who have written about or have endorsed or give some comments about this book. I'll just name a few of them, if you permit me. It begins with Savio Rodriguez of Goa Chronicle, Anand Ranganathan, Suhail Seth, Ratan Shardaji. I think Ratan Shardaji is watching this program. My pranams to you, sir. Sandeep Balakrishnan, Professor Vaidyanathan, Ashwin Sanghi, Madhav Nalapatji, Ashwini Mahajan, Sumansi Raman, Chandralekhaji, Anurag Saxena. Incidentally, anybody from south of India will always hold Chandralekhaji as their hero and heroine, all put together because of the trials and tribulations that she has seen in her life. She has been a great inspiration. Then, of course, Mohandas Pai, Advaita Kalaji herself was there, Giridhar Mamedi, Vinay Sahasrabudhe, Dichendra Bajaj. Then we had Colonel Prohit and Prasanjit Basu. All these people have endorsed this book. So I'm grateful to them personally. And last but not the least, my very good friend Arnab Goswami has penned the foreword for this book. And I should also thank him for this. He has taken time and he has been very kind enough to, although he has taken almost 2 months, but he did Deraya Durustaya, that type of thing. And he was kind enough to give me this. So a lot of people with whom I had discussed dialogue and people like Govindacharya, with whom we could have endless amount of discussions on the interplay between society and economics. These are the people who have helped me to write this book. So it is not a one man's contribution. Of course, errors are entirely mine. The credit, if any, goes to all these people who have guided me and helped me. That's what I would say.
Well, I wish you all the best, Dr. MRV, and Gauriji, Krishnanji. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to be part of this hangout. And as always, viewers, do like our videos, share it, and also help us increase our subscriber count. Thanks for watching, and namaskar.